it's a nice Tuesday evening. So I'm Chris Williamson from Weston Williamson and Partners, and I'm going to talk about the future of transport and the impact on our cities. So a couple of years ago, I wrote an article for the first edition of the London School of Architecture's Citizen magazine, looking at trends and opportunities in transport and how the impact of new technology would impact on our environment. When you consider how the impact of technology has changed the way we work and the way we are entertained, and then look at what future technologies are proposed about how we're going to travel between and around our cities, the effect on our environment will, I think, be immense. But when considering that, I was also looking at how little people have changed. This is an oily plan of Rome from 1748, and some of the streets and some of the spaces, this kind of spaces that we like as people, haven't changed for 2,000 years. So if the Emperor Tiberius, who was around 2,000 years ago, came back, he would find a lot of new buildings, obviously, a lot of taller buildings. He would be amazed at the technology around us. But as people, we've changed very little. We still die of the same things, pandemics. We still eat the same food. We still have the same illnesses. Healthcare is better, but we still enjoy the same sort of spaces. This is the hand of Corbusier and his model of Ville Radieuse from 1924, reimagining the city. And so I think we're at a particular point in our development where we have important decisions to make concerning the future of the planet. And I was 12 when Neil Armstrong landed on the moon, and to me it demonstrated two things. Firstly, we can achieve amazing results when we have the political will to achieve something. When Kennedy said he was going to go, the USA were going to go to the moon, they hadn't a clue how to do it, but they did it. And we need to have the same sort of political will for climate change. Secondly, we can develop technological solutions to very difficult problems. And we can also learn from history. I mean, we kind of snigger when we see these images now. This is the Liverpool to Manchester railway in 1830. It was the first modern railway in the world. And you couldn't believe how exciting this was at the time and how precarious it was. I mean, people died when, you know, there was a guy killed on the opening day of the railway. This was exciting and modern and revolutionary. And it was driven by industry. It linked two cities, Liverpool, Manchester, sparked an amazing 50-year railway boom, which reshaped our society and our cities. And we're at a similarly exciting time with new technologies which will affect our cities. Some of them are enabling a 15-minute city to work by looking at the last mile. Some of them are sort of low tech in a way. Some are based on existing and old technologies and will improve the way that we see our cities. And our leaders, our politicians are also looking at the cities. We've been working on some of the TfL schemes, changing the gyratory systems at places like Highbury Corner and Archway, changing what gyratory roundabouts to three-sided and ensuring more pedestrian and cycle spaces. And this was one that didn't go ahead, looking with TfL at removing the Westway, a TfL scheme, which was looking at, so there's loads of traffic calming schemes, gradually making driving less attractive and cycling and walking easier. And I've always been fascinated by visions of the future and the possibilities of travel. I think these are amazing inventions, amazing visions of the future. And the great thing about the future, in some respects, is you can say what you like and envisage what you like, and nobody can prove you wrong until you look back at them and say, well, that didn't work. But there are amazing technological solutions that have been proposed for more than half a century. Some of them fantastic, and some more possible, and some fantastic imagery, and some fanciful, but some are not too far away. And these are images that we're going to see within the next 10 years. Some interesting and thought-provoking, that there are some fantastic images out there of people's visions of the future. And increasingly, some like Hyperloop are being actively worked on and tested. And others, like our work with Tyson Krupp, who have developed a lift and tested a lift which moves sideways as well as vertically, pulled by electromagnets, which will enable new building forms, such as this proposal above a high-speed station in Singapore. But our interest in transport as a practice started in 1989, when we entered a competition for Venice bus station. And that attracted the attention of the Italian head of architecture for the Jubilee line, who chose us to design London Bridge station. And we've since seen the effect that the investment in infrastructure has had on development and how it has shaped the city. In the Jubilee line's case, the whole of the East End of London. But more importantly, we have become to appreciate how this work can help combat the effects of climate change and help reverse some of the impacts of what we've been doing on our environment and the effects on our cities and on our physical and mental health. So the way we've been designing cities, this is Milton Keynes in the 1970s, planned around the motor car, and we wouldn't design like that today. This is a hypothetical city for 500,000 people, which we work on from time to time at Weston Williamson to test ideas. It has a high-speed station at its centre and no private vehicles within its 1 kilometre diameter centre. And there are many visions of the future, most of them dystopian, like Blade Runner. But we think the new technology for both the buildings, for the assembly and construction of buildings, for how we're going to distribute, or the possibilities for distributing goods, and how we're going to move around our cities and look after our cities, that the new technologies will lead us to a green and pleasant future and allow us exciting, interesting architecture. And the reason for that view is based on our experience of history, and looking at what the Victorians achieved and the legacy of the infrastructure that they have left us, and also the present. This shows our work on some of our London transport projects, which has led to many other projects globally. And some of the projects are big city shaping projects like Crossrail and Melbourne Metro. Others are smaller, but equally important, such as the East London line, again, acting as catalyst for development. So for quite a small, modest outlay, the amount of development which has been realized on the back of it is amazing. And the business case for some of these projects is fantastic. But also the way in which this shows quite a modest station at Dalston Junction, and it reuses the old North London line. But on the back of that small station, there are 750 flats, new businesses, new commercial spaces, and a new interchange with the local buses as well. So it's whether it's at a large city shaping scale like Crossrail or a more modest scale like the East London line, there are fantastic opportunities for predicated around public transport, safe, efficient, well-designed public transport. And on the North London line, the Victorian arches are a fantastic legacy. And at Hoxton Station, behind the Jeffrey Museum, there are, within the whole of that viaduct, there are fantastic bars, restaurants, cafes, new businesses in the arches because of the throughput and the footfall that the infrastructure brings. And that's the same is true on Crossrail. When you pick up a newspaper in Singapore or Malaysia, there are adverts for flats, for apartments, for homes within walking distance of Crossrail, and Crossrail is increasing the scale and amount of development around the station, and also creating a more polycentric city, giving people choice of where to live and work. Not everybody needs to go into the West End or the city. There are local centres developing. So 40% of planning applications are within a kilometre of the line. And one example of that is the Crossrail station at Woolwich. Originally, there wasn't going to be a station at Woolwich, but the owner of the Woolwich Arsenal site, Berkeley Homes, petitioned Parliament with the support of the local council and paid for the design of the station, and then built the box, which has been kitted out and completed by Crossrail. And on the back of that, there's a really lively development 20 minutes away from the heart of the city. Again, giving people the choice of where to live and work, and a new centre outside of London. And creating great urban spaces as well, with a collection of businesses and residential use. And this is Paddington Station. We completed the work on the north side of Paddington Station. This is a new ticket hall for London Underground, and a new entrance into Paddington Station using the similar motifs to Digby Wyatt and Isambard Kingdom Brunel on the main shed in the fenestration of the glass, and a new taxi rank in the centre of the picture, which allowed us to remove the taxi rank from the south side of the station and create a new urban space for the new Crossrail entrance. So this is an example of the kind of new urban spaces which will be revealed once Crossrail is opened at each station, creating new possibilities for development and businesses and communities in throughout London. So there's a 140-metre long canopy on the side of the Brunel station, and Spencer Finch, a New York artist, has developed a cloudscape which is laminated into the glass. So these will be beautiful stations. It's a shame about the delay. Not a lot of that is down to the architecture, but these are complex projects, and part of the things we can learn from history, which we also need to take to the future and get better, is that delays, cost overruns, issues with the site, and the number of stakeholders that are involved in these projects. When you read the histories of the development of the railways in London and in Manchester and elsewhere, these problems have always been the same, and we just need to get better and more sophisticated at solving them. But just as the legacy of the infrastructure of the Victorians has been amazing, I think the legacy of what we're doing now and the city shaping possibilities will be immense. So as soon as you get off the train at Paddington, you can see the direction of travel from stepping off the train onto the platform. You can see the canopy above you, through the escalators. And as you circulate around the ticket hall and the concourse, that natural light coming into the station guides you and gives you a clear direction of travel. So these are all devices that will help us to design better in the future. And these are huge civil engineering projects. This is a 250-meter long box underneath Eastbourne Terrace, which was kept open during construction, and clear direct travel, and great city shaping projects. And so it's leading to a different kind of growth through London. You only have to look at the recently opened Battersea station and the Nine Elms stations. They're quite modest underground stations, an extension to the Northern Line, but they've had a huge effect. And whether you like the development, you can argue, as I would, that there isn't the social housing, there isn't the affordable housing that there should be. That they are incredible city shaping projects and creating, again, more choice in a polycentric city of where people can live and work. So the TOD model, transport oriented development model, is looking at that east-west with local centres, and also starts looking at the north-south Crossrail 2 link and how that might integrate into the city. And so Crossrail 2, it's not going to happen anytime soon, but the business case is good, and obviously there are fantastic opportunities for the future of the city and the possibilities that offers in the centre. But to us, on the right of this drawing, the opportunities are more interesting in the East End, in that east of the city, where places like Enfield, by moving some of the industry out towards the M25 and utilizing there are 5 new stations on that leg, and creating communities predicated around the new transport. There are fantastic opportunities to reshape that part of the city. And these are projects which galvanize the office. And as well as working on live projects, we also try to test out different ideas. So we were asked to look at what happens when Crossrail 2 needs the Victoria coach station as a work site and where that might move to. And our solution proposal was, well, why bring all those hundreds of coaches into central London? Why can't you have a transport hub on the edge of, on the east and the west of the city, and let everybody come into London on Crossrail? So keeping out all the coaches and allowing onward travel as you need to, rather than bringing everybody into Victoria. So we have a particular approach which deals with multiple stakeholders, which we have an elemental optioneering system where we look at each option in turn, looking at the different elements of the project and try and get as many people with different voices into the room as possible and vote on each one. So we've developed a particular way of working for these.
Northern Line, the next train to Finchley Central via Charing Cross will arrive in 2 minutes. Next station, Tooting Bec.
Sorry, that was relevant interruption. We've also recently developed a commuter satisfaction survey. So we've looked at 10 global cities, 2 in Australia, 2 in Canada, 2 in the USA, 2 in the Far East, and 2 in the UK, and comparing the way people move around each city. And we're going to use that as a basis of an annual survey to look at trends, so that as projects like Crossrail come on stream, you would expect the satisfaction ratings to go up, and you would expect different modes of transport, different travel patterns. So we're going to monitor those year on year, and we've got some amazing data from that initial study, looking at broken down for age, for gender, for different modes of travel, and we can monitor that year on year to look forward to the future. We also, as a practice, like to get involved with our local neighborhood forums. We've always been associated with the local residents groups wherever we've been, and so wherever we live or wherever we work. So this is a proposal for Crouch End, for the Crouch End neighborhood forum, looking at traffic calming and a shared streetscape in the center of Crouch End. And when I went to the RIBA conference in New York a couple of years ago, I was appalled at how little New York had done to make Manhattan more accessible and more interesting for cyclists and for pedestrians. So we did a scheme which looked at the pedestrianization and shared streets for Broadway from the one end of Manhattan to the other, so that there's one street where you can act as an oasis for pedestrians and for cyclists.
Look this time.
And there are lots of examples of showing how that can be done. This is Miami, the design district in Miami, and they've closed all the streets for cars. So there are some which are traffic calmed, such as the one in front, but it creates a really special place. And it's the pedestrians that have the priority, not the cars. and it shows what can be done. So next month, I'm going to be leading a design think tank at the London School of Architecture, looking particularly at this subject, the future of transport. So we're going to be looking at the history and the future of transport technology, and looking at how that will impact on a particular part of London. And the part of London that I've been given is Bishopsgate. And we're going to be looking at the Bishopsgate goods yard, which is particularly interesting because it has the London Overground coming into it at the north, but it has some really interesting interfaces with the designer district of Shoreditch, with the Redchurch Street area to the north, the Brick Lane to the east, and with the city, the interface with the city. And these edge of city areas are a great place to look at connectivity, both with local existing infrastructure, transport infrastructure, and how people will onward travel from there. So looking at the history, when Bishopsgate's goods yard was built, it was mainly horse and cart, and the traffic movements were immense. And as more goods took to the railway, Bishopsgate, most of the produce, most of the construction materials came into Bishopsgate goods yard, and Liverpool Street was the passenger terminal. So looking at the history of how these stations were designed, what the legacy which they've left us, and the possibilities for their reuse, because as things took to the road, Bishopsgate goods yard became unnecessary, but the site is still there, and there are various proposals for it. So we're going to be examining those proposals, and the students will come up with various solutions for various parts of the site, looking at those 4 areas and how they connect to particular parts of the city. So this is going to be a really interesting project, and if anybody wants to get involved and contribute, they would be very welcome. And we will see what the students do and share their ideas for the future of this part of the city. So that concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to host a discussion and answer any questions that you might have.
Thanks very much, Chris. May I ask a question?
Sure. Yeah.
Well, I can see that you didn't speak at all about Highways England. Now I ask because it seems you're concentrating more, or your clients are more the railway sector. For the future of transport, are you looking at, have you considered the Highways England smart motorways concept, and what do you feel about that? Or do you totally disregard it, you know?
No, I mean, I think that there are fantastic opportunities for automated vehicles, for and I think it's going to take a large cultural shift. There are lots of issues about insurance, about technology, about responsibility, but you know, that they are incredibly exciting. But I think what excites us as a practice is the communal transport. I think people, to me, being in London, being part of London is about sharing your experience with others.
Yeah.
And I think there's a community which develops around shared experiences, and obviously the pandemic hasn't been great for public transport, but if we can, the city has always bounced back stronger whenever there's been plagues and pandemics in the past, and I think it will continue to. We need to make adjustments. We need to improve the way, we need to relieve congestion, not make it a more civilized way of traveling. But to me, I suppose we're looking at more about the communal public transport rather than road transport.
Right.
But there are exciting possibilities there, and as you could see from some of those illustrations from the 40s and 50s,
Yes.
some exciting opportunities, but that's not really going to improve our cities. I think when we're looking at what technology will bring us, we shouldn't be looking at what is possible. We should be looking at why we need it. So if you know, there are lots of things that are possible, like there's the Back to the Future hoverboard, there's the personalized drone or jetpack, but unless it's going to improve sustainability and make our cities more pleasant, that should be our criteria, not what is technologically possible, but what is environmentally necessary, I think. And then from that, we can decide whether we want to develop the technology to achieve that. And I'm not sure whether how far smart motorways get us as in relation to where we are at the moment.
Okay, thanks very much. And now I know where your thinking is. I'll throw in a quick one. It's just for you to think about, and we can pick it up later. But there's a problem that the developing world, especially in and around Africa, you can limit it to the Commonwealth countries. That will make it easier. And they've been grappling with. And I mean, several people have tried, but this organic thing about lots of people using the road as a marketplace is really hampering the urban development, and this is a major problem. But I noticed that that wasn't one of the areas that you're looking at. It's an interesting thing, and we probably can pick it up later when I'll be able to explain what is going on and what the authorities want to achieve and what is not happening because of the proliferation of people who want to eke out a living, spilling out onto urban areas or into cityscapes and such thing, which is hampering the urban experience for so many, and how far one can go, because people need to make a living. So it is a social and economic problem as well as a developmental one. And probably later on I'll be able to expand a little bit on it.
Okay, yeah. Well, I'll just take Nigel's question and then come back to you, Audrey, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Hi, Chris. Thanks. That was lovely, and I love some of those images, the future gazing ones. They're always brilliant. One of them was sort of you were saying, you know, autonomous cars are nearly with us, and yeah, they seem to be. I was going to ask, have you, in your work, considered or had reason to sort of investigate that in any sort of way to look at because clearly that could be completely different, and it's sort of like mass customization for transport, because it's like a train, you know, you get to Edinburgh in, you know, I don't know, very little time in these things that travel at great speed, much safer because we don't have road traffic accidents anymore. But so that I'm interested in. It's interested whether you've got a view on how far away that might be. I mean, a bit of future gazing. And the other thing I was going to say, 2 questions, is the whole thing about airplanes and how we can possibly be considering. And Foster was recently saying we've got to architects must carry on getting engaged in airports. Slightly contentious view, really, for anyone that has a concern about the environment, because I just don't see how we can justify increasing air flight and still reduce our carbon emissions. So 2 things: have you looked at autonomous cars in your studies, and have you looked at airplanes? And I guess that might be slightly outside your sort of remit, but just interested to hear your views.
Yeah. So we've been working. There's an industrial designer, Paul Priestman, who's been looking at autonomous vehicles, and we've been looking at that project with him. And there are great opportunities, but I mean, it's going to be really interesting to see whether there's one sort of autonomous vehicles which is city centric, and then if you want to go up to Manchester, would you sit in the same vehicle? Would it be designed in the same way? If it's got tootling along at 20 miles an hour in the city, would it then be capable of joining together with other vehicles and going at 100 miles an hour on the smart motorway? So that the way, and then there's issues of ownership, because it's going to be, are you going to come back in it? Where is it going to be? Who's going to pay for it? Is it going to be yours, or is it going to be Google's or Apple's? So there are lots of exciting possibilities, but we're still working them through. I suppose as an architect, our sort of interest is how it will shape the city, and how it can mean that you can have shared surfaces, you can have more planting, you can have a greener environment in both senses of the word. And I mean, just on a prosaic level, places like Marylebone High Street, which have started to remove car parking spaces and have more planting and interesting urban landscape, that those sorts of things are going to add to the quality of the environment. And the pandemic has sort of accelerated that in a way, and a lot of local residents are annoyed that they're around Hackney. The streets have been closed off by new planters, but obviously we have to take the community with us in terms of how those schemes are implemented. But they do start to show how the city can be a better place, can be a greener place with more planting, less car parking, less through traffic, and if it's well designed, be a much more interesting, civilized city. So I think on the autonomous vehicles, I'm particularly interested in is the effect on the environment. And not so long ago, there was the motor rail service where you used to be able to drive your car onto, certainly in my lifetime, I think it was only stopped in the year 2000. So you used to be able to drive your car onto the train, and for any of us that have done that through the Channel Tunnel, it's actually a really fantastic way of traveling, and you can imagine how that could work at lots of, and so that might be the way that autonomous vehicles travel long distances, is teaming up with the train. So there are great possibilities on the aviation. I mean, the environmentalists are very keen that although aviation might only contribute a small percentage of the global carbon emissions, it's an easy win for the environment lobby to say travel by air less, and technology will improve, whether it's solar panels, battery technology, hydrogen planes, greener fuels. The technology will improve, but it's not improving at the rate that it needs to combat the climate change issues we have at the moment. So I think that is a difficult one, and that you know, that there needs to be a proper look. That the architectural community seems to be very divided between the people that design airports and the people that don't, and we need to somehow bridge that divide and have a more calmer look at what we can do in the design of airports and the technology that surrounds the airport, and you know, whether taxiing can all be done by electronic or hydrogen fuel, and then you know, so there are lots of things, and there's people. I mean, we're working on one project with Innovate UK with Logan Air, looking at zero carbon flight, but trying to scale that up to commercial operation is very difficult. But you know, I suppose, like anybody who was 12 when Neil Armstrong landed on the moon, I kind of like to think that we have the technological expertise, and we have that at our disposal if we have the political will to achieve it. And Norman Foster probably feels the same way, that you know, if we want to travel, then we should be able to design the solution to it. But we do need that. And when Kennedy said they were going to go to the moon, he was in charge of one country. We have to galvanize lots of countries in order to achieve what we need to achieve, and I think that's the big issue. So yeah, so who else is Paul? Yeah.
Yeah, I took a trip last Saturday on a Uber Clipper down from Greenwich to London Eye, packed full, busy, very effective way of transport. Frustratingly, you've got a map behind you. I don't know if it's a section of the Thames or another river with a number of crossings.
Yeah.
You said nothing about the potential for the greater use of the river for public transport, either in London or other cities. It is a ready-built public highway, massive scale, for the most part these days, unlike hundreds of years ago, underused. Is there not scope for, in London and indeed other cities, far greater scope for increasing public transport use of a ready-made highway in a very truly sustainable way? Parallel, I suppose, to what one gets in Venice, and indeed an extrapolation of what we have at the moment in the Uber Clippers in London.
Yeah, no, you're right. It is a map of the Thames, and it's actually a proposal that I mentioned, the community work that we do, that the head or the chairman of the Bermondsey Street Association has been working on this scheme since 1990, looking at a new promenade on the south of the river, and part of that is new piers for boats to allow more boats to use the Thames. And I agree, the Thames, compared with lots of rivers, is very underused, and it links so many certainly tourist attractions, but also different parts of the city. It's a fantastic artery, and it's always been a shame for that it isn't used more. And I don't know why that is. I think there's a combination of factors, whether it's the Port of London Authority, whether it's the police, whether it's safety concerns. But it is a great opportunity, and I think the new Uber and the Clippers in general are a fantastic way of getting about. But it is more expensive mode of transport, and I don't know. But so. But if it's increased, then it might become more affordable for the majority of people. But
Yeah, of course, it's a ready-made massive highway as it is, without needing to do any greater, for the most part, building of infrastructure to make it affect the width of the river, the Thames, the Tyne as well. Massive width in terms of availability for much greater use. You look at Capletto's paintings of London, it just massively occupied by boat traffic for freight and for passengers.
Yeah, it's a lovely way to travel as well. And I think with the work that's being done on Thames Tideway and how the river is going to be improved, it would be a fantastic time to look at the river, both in terms of its walkability because there are certain parts of the embankments that are incredibly congested, but also the way that the river can be used. I mean, you could have, when Thames Tideway is completed, you could have freshwater swimming. You could have a whole new look at the way the river is utilised as a resource for the city. It would be a fantastic time to do that.
Thanks.
So, Audrey, do you want to go back to your question of the use of the markets? Is that what you were discussing?
Yeah. Yes, Chris. Yes, Chris. What's happening and what has been happening? And I know some people have written about it as if it were exotic and if it's lovely, but it's not. It's not really. If you're trying to develop an urban area or a city to meet international standards, which is the problem that is happening in the developing parts of the developing world, especially where the controls are more benign, and you don't have authoritarian leadership who flog people and tell people don't do this or that. They are quite liberal in that way. And so along urban streetscapes and along civic buildings, you can have, sadly, a proliferation of what people who were termed hawkers, who are carrying their wares on their head or putting up a table, a small table, and suddenly you have a marketplace. Suddenly you have people coming to buy food, and the street food is always very appealing. So before you can say anything, suddenly you have a market that has sprung up, and more people are doing that. It gets to a point where it's not funny anymore. It's not funny anymore because the governments have sunk in a lot of scarce resources into improving their urban roads or their city roads, say inner city centers. And, suddenly you have people they say they need to earn a living. It is true. Everyone, both sides of the coin, each of them they've got a point. But it is a problem that the countries are grappling with. And over the last few months, some of the governments have tried to take a more stern opinion. I've looked at a few schemes have come to me that I've looked at. And I think it would be interesting to study it. Other architectural companies in the UK have picked up one or two of these issues and have studied it, but it's not an easy thing at all. And I was wondering if you had ever been introduced to such a scheme and whether you would be interested at all in trying to understand what could be done,
Well, I think, I mean, the traders and businesses and all sorts of activity. I've often been attracted to, you can see from those images of the Victorian stations how different activities were attracted to the stations, and you know, in a more sophisticated way.
Yes.
That's exactly what's happening in King's Cross and St Pancras and all the refurbished stations that are being now. They're attracted because of the liveliness and the footfall of the stations, and I mean, in a way, that's what we like about traveling through India, is the railways and the excitement, the hustle and bustle.
Yes, yes.
On the side of the road, it does need to be
organized
a bit better, probably, because it does become dangerous.
That's right. Yes.
But that it's part of the liveliness of the city. But I think, you know, and as you know, every city in the world is becoming more, you know, the same issues of urbanization and people coming from the rural environments into the city. That's causing the pressure on those sorts of environments, I think, because that's where they, you know, that they can congregate and they have access to
that.
But yeah, it is a worldwide problem, and we haven't had any real
foray into that
in that part of the world. Peter has his hand up.
Yep. Hi, Chris. Thank you very much for a very interesting historical tour, and I love your graphic collection. I hope that's from your own collection. We can look at it another day. What I was going to say, I put it on the chat pane, but do you think that the balance between the big infrastructure of transport costs and budgets is understandably large and difficult? But don't you think that walking, and everybody who travels on any kind of transport vehicle mode is also a pedestrian, and that the amount of money invested, and of course it's generally speaking public authority money relative to development money, is too low just to do the simple things on streets, and something akin to what Audrey's talking about, the costs of managing markets and keeping streets clean and uncluttered for the safe movement of lots of people with whatever their activity is. Do you think it's out of balance? And is there anything we can do beyond what TfL and the boroughs in London and up and down the country can do because of the amount of investment that they have had reduced, generally speaking?
I do think there's an issue. I mean, Terry Farrell always used to argue that when he did a development, you know, it might cost several £1,000s per square metre, but then the public realm was tens of pounds a square metre outside of it. And I know Anne Winter and other people, and Minter has an issue with the privatisation of public space, and that. But when you look at developments like Canary Wharf and More London and others, they do spend more on those urban spaces, and they are, you know, that there are issues of accessibility and patrol, but they are really nice spaces. And in King's Cross, when you see the local kids playing in the fountains, it's nice to see that sort of money being spent in the urban realm, as long as it's available for everybody to use. But there is an equality between how much our buildings cost and how little we spend in the spaces between our buildings. And I think that you know, I mentioned before the planting that's being done in Hackney and Islington. it's nice, but it could be done so much nicer. You've got, you know, timber planters or worse just being put together overnight, but the intent is there, but there are only a few places like Marylebone High Street, which I mentioned, that seem to be doing it more carefully, and you have, you know, a bit nicer planting, a bit more thought, a bit more considered, and that to me is the way forward. More consideration about the kinds of plants that are used, the nature of how it's done, as well as closing the streets to close
Sure.
them in a
But
nice.
as you know, Chris, well, I'm sure that the work done by the Crown Estate on Westminster's public highways and indeed at Marylebone is basically largely funded from private estates who have buildings all along those streets. And the problem is connecting up the good places to the same standard. And that's where, I mean, the best probable thing of the recent few decades is the removal of a huge amount, but not all, of guard railing on streets, which was put in as a misdirected safety measure in many places. In the future, the innovations that you've talked about, e-scooters, e-bikes, active travel measures, so-called, or short-term ones, they are taking up a lot of footway space. They're actually adding an innovative, well-intended, but sometimes misplaced and miscited quality of new clutter. They have a value, but they also have a price, and the price is reducing very limited footway widths or taking out car parking bays in order to achieve things in existing cities. It's easier in a new city, completely new city environment. So there is an area where it doesn't seem like the investment in quality design is coming from those promoters of private, or in some cases public, new simple initiatives to try and make the streets work better for pedestrians and for cyclists and for e-scooters and so on. And we see the same with electric vehicle charging points, which I know I've mentioned to you before. The charging units, especially the large high-speed ones, they're all of different designs. They all seem to suddenly come with cables and bollards which don't consider anything about pedestrian movement. They're only about just squeezing it in where they can. So there's a lot of private company money that is not really being channeled along with public money from the public highways to get these things much better designed.
Yeah.
It is a worry.
No, I agree. There's so much more that could be done, and the proliferation of electric bikes for hire is to be applauded in many respects. But it, you know, the amount of apps you have to download to have that choice. It would be nice if it was more coordinated and you had a more accessible record of where you could get a bike, because and also take, if you had more joined up thinking, so you knew that if you were traveling from London to Manchester and you knew you could get a bike, and you know when you were there, or you could book one, or it was all done on the same app. I think that's hopefully where we're heading with the new, as the new technologies develop. So you'd be able to plan your journey door to door rather than city to city. But I'm sure it will come. But it's, and you know, it's not. But I agree with you that in the short term, just as the proliferation of different communication providers in the 80s caused loads of different telephone boxes and all sorts of infrastructure. To us, that urban clutter never gets any better. It's always
well, it can grow. I say,
yeah.
as you said, with not just with the planters. I mean, there's every good reason why we would like to have more art of a good quality or an interesting quality all over the city. But sometimes, we find it gets to ridiculous sighting and difficulties that people just feel they can't object to it because it's art, so it must be good. But if it's jumped in and not considered with all those stakeholders that you have to deal with anyway, we always have a lot more stakeholders when you have different authorities with different money bags and not enough money in each of them from the public or the private sector to make a decent job. But anyway, well done. And as you know, on two-way traffic gyratories, like Trafalgar Square used to be a gyratory, and St James's two-way, and now recently, obviously, Tottenham Court Road and Gower Street two-way. Those have taken a long time to catch on as ways of actually reorganizing. And I think that there's a lot that could be done, not just Archway. There's still many, many, many places up and down the country and around the world where that is a solution to actually invest in public realm and public spaces where the wasted space for vehicles can be reorganized in a more efficient way.
Yeah, it's been really nice to see how London has improved. I mean, you know, a lot of motorists don't like it, but pedestrians outside of Highbury Tube Station and Archway Tube Station, it's also leading to a more civilized city. And I know you've been pioneering that for many years.
Any.
Okay, anyone else have a question? If not, I will let everybody carry on with the evening, and thank you very much for listening.
Thanks very much, Chris. It's been brilliant. So it is gone 7 though. So if no one has any more questions, then we'll draw the event to a close. Is everyone happy to do that, or are there any more questions for Chris?
Yep. Thank you very much.
It's been wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Bye.
Bye
Thanks
bye.
very much.
Bye everybody. Have a nice
Bye.
evening.
You too. Thanks.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.